everyone, welcome. My name is Chris Komalski. I'm the tutor for critical thinking and worldviews. I want to get started. I was waiting for Salt River 2T guys to possibly show up, but I don't know where they are. So we are just going to get moving because I know some people are watching live and I want to respect your time and give some time for us to talk. There's not very many of you today, so feel free to unmute yourself at any point throughout this presentation and ask me a question or type a question in the group chat and I will respond to you directly. Sandra, you are the only one that is actually signed in through the Google Hangout system. Other people are watching it live via YouTube, so that's a little different for them. So feel free to speak to me directly if you'd like to, because I'm here to help you regardless of how many people show up or watch this later. So today we are going over a couple things together. We are going to look and speak a bit about the guide to rewriting essays as well as your audio presentation. I want to give you some input on the idea of explanations, reasoning, and fallacies, particularly in regards to how you write as well as argue something orally, well, actually on video. We're going to look at applying some skills. And that is basically it. It's a pretty simple and short one today, although I want to give some time for you to ask questions if you have some. Moving forward, just a couple words on assignments that are coming up. Assignment number 3 is a rewrite of your assignment number 2. I want to say that both for you, Sandra, listening live, as well as whoever listens to this in the future, Bastian and myself are about halfway done, it seems like, with grading your essays. We are shooting to be completely done by Friday. So that would be, I believe, the 17th of May. And we want to give you another solid 11 days or so to do your rewrite of your assignment number 2. We're trying to give you specific feedback on your research essay, but if there is questions that we do not answer or you're not sure about our comments, please feel free to message us via Funda, and we will get back to you on that. Your essay, as it says there, point number 2, your essay will be returned with tracked commentary, this notes system that Microsoft Word has as to where to improve in terms of critical thinking writing skills. For example, we're going to speak about things like argument strengthening or referencing that is required, or logicality, or getting rid of fallacies. And so the big point, and this is what Bastian put in red, is that we need to make sure that when you open up your essay that we return to you, you use the tracked version to make your changes. Now, most of us have not used that feature within Microsoft Word, so you need to make sure your tracking is on. So let me just be very clear here. Where is that located? It is located under the review menu, excuse me, in Microsoft Word. Some people also call the tracked version the notes version or the commentary version. So again, just make sure that that's on, or you're not going to see our comments and you'll think that we didn't write anything in your essay, which is actually not true for any of you. So that's assignment number 3. The due dates you can see in the syllabus. Assignment number 4 is your oral presentation. That also is going to be due on the 28th of May. And basically, you have been emailed as well as a much more detailed, sorry, I'm losing my words, a much more detailed explanation of what you need to do will be put on Funda tonight. But you basically need to record a 5-minute in length audio presentation. It's going to be about your explanation and argument in regards to a particular worldview, but Bastian will post that stuff tonight. You need to figure out how to post it to YouTube. If you don't know how to do that, or you've never uploaded a video to YouTube, that is something you're going to have to figure out how to do. You're also going to have to figure out how to find the right equipment to be able to do that. If you have a smartphone of any kind, you probably actually could just set up your phone to record yourself if you do it in 1 or 2 takes and upload it right there to YouTube. Most smartphones have that capability. But we want to make sure that you also let us have the link in a Microsoft Word document and upload this onto Funda as if it was your essay. The content for assignment number 4 is on the research essay, which you've already done, assignment number 2. And what you are doing in this audio present or oral presentation is defending the contemporary worldview of that essay, or excuse me, of your essay as a worldview. So if you are arguing for the validity of the Islamic worldview, you need to be able to do that audio in an audio version orally. Okay, so please see the essay and grading guide on Funda for this and how to do that. Let me pause here quickly before we move into some content to see, is there any questions? Sandra, do you have any questions for me specifically, or does anybody else have any questions? Awesome. I'm going to move on then. On to some of our content for today. Okay, first of all, we want to look at something that we call deductive reasoning. This is to help you as you rewrite your essay as well as prepare your oral presentation. We are going to be looking for a certain style of reasoning as you argue. And so we want to go through two of the main forms of reasoning and help you understand the difference. They're subtle, but it's actually quite a distinctive difference. So please stop me if this does not make sense to you. We'll try to just talk conversationally. So what is deductive reasoning? Deductive reasoning, a deductive argument is one in which it is impossible for the premises of the argument to be true and the conclusion false. Meaning, if the premises or the starting place in your argument is true, the conclusion must be true. Thus, as it says on the screen, the conclusion follows absolutely from the premises. If something is true, another thing is true. If the premise is right, the conclusion will be right. In this way, it is supposed to be a proof of the truth of the claim. Again, the conclusion is a proof of the truth of the claim. Here's a simple example of that, as you see on your screen. If we start with a premise in an argument that all men are mortal, meaning that everyone will die at some point and is fallible, nobody will live eternally and forever. And we add to that premise a second premise that says that Martin Luther King Jr. was a man, we can deductively infer from those two statements that therefore Martin Luther King was mortal. How do we know that? We know that because all men are mortal, premise number one, as well as Martin Luther King was a man as your second premise. Therefore, we can include or sort of mash together both premises to say that Martin Luther King was mortal. Let me pause before I move on to inductive and say, does that make sense so far? Okay, inductive reasoning as a comparison to deductive reasoning. An inductive argument is one in which the premises are supposed to support the conclusion in such a way that if the premises are true, it is improbable that the conclusion would be false. So I hope you see the word improbable versus the previous slide, absolutely. Deductive reasoning is absolutely true in its conclusions. Inductive reasoning is that it is improbable that the conclusion would be false. Thus, as this sentence says, the conclusion follows probably from the premises and the inferences, but not necessarily. Now, let me give you an example of inductive reasoning. Here's another example, again using Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King was an African-American man. That is a premise that we can prove and that we actually know is true. A second premise that we are going to add to that for the sake of this inductive reasoning example is that African-American men prefer to eat meat to vegetables. Now, our conclusion is the fact that Martin Luther King ate meat. Now, how do we conclude that? First of all, go back to the first premise. Martin Luther King is African American. Our second premise says that African American men prefer to eat meat to vegetables. Therefore, we can reasonably or probably conclude that Martin Luther King ate meat. However, what if he didn't? What if he was a vegetarian, or he preferred, because of his diet or the particular food he was able to afford or to get, depending on where he was, to rather eat vegetables and fruit as opposed to meat? Just because he is an African American man does not make Martin Luther King someone who only eats meat as opposed to vegetables, and therefore we call this inductive reasoning as opposed to deductive reasoning. Okay, let me stop here and say, Sandra, does this make sense? Are you following this? Are you completely lost? Perfect, thank you. The key here in regards to your essay revision as well as your audio presentation is to move towards deductive reasoning as opposed to inductive reasoning. So let me scroll back one last time before I move forward. A deductive argument is one in which it is impossible for the premises of the argument to be true and the conclusion false. So just see the focus on logical thinking and logical premises which lead to a conclusion that is absolutely true. You are arguing from this sort of point of view. There is nothing in here that is personally focused or opinion-based. It is something that you can prove. If we go back to the inductive reasoning example, the second premise is the premise that is problematic here and is one that would be very difficult to prove. How do we know that African American men prefer to eat meat to vegetables? Have you done a survey that is exhaustive? What if it's African American men from a particular state or part of the country as opposed to the whole? So this is just something that you want to avoid. You want to avoid inductive reasoning in your arguments, and you want to move towards deductive reasoning as much as possible. Okay, moving forward. Just a little bit of stuff on explanations and arguments, some criteria that, again, you can put it within your essays or within your audio presentation for analyzing the explanations you are writing. A couple points I want to say here, and again, this will also be on Funda, this entire PowerPoint. But first, I want you guys to remember that you need to determine whether what is said or read seeks to explain something, i.e. the why or the how. And is that being posed to answer a question? You need to figure out what is being explained in a situation, what reasons are being given in the explanatory form, basically the because. Why is this perspective being argued? What do you want to respond to as you think about that? And basically the question here, what is the explanation being offered to answer the why/how question? Moving forward, you need to determine whether the explanation is relevant to what is being explained, meaning does it fit in with the larger point or argument you are trying to build, or have you just taken us on a tangent that takes the wind out of the essay or the audio argument you are building for us? You need to determine whether the explanation is not only relevant but coherent within our established knowledge of the world. An example for this for me is I was grading an essay recently that had to do with a very, like a subset of the Islamic worldview, a particular people group within the Islamic worldview. And the person arguing within this essay for that perspective was obviously quite well voiced within this perspective. And so there were numerous times where the student referred to things within the essay that he would know, or the person would know, who was writing the essay, but I really had no clue about because I am not Islamic myself. And so there needs to be an adequate amount of understanding and coherence to make sure that your argument is clear and not being assumed by the reader. Number 3, you need to assess whether the explanation is possible or believable. is this something that you can actually conclude, as well as sort of a takeoff of that, is that particular explanation the best possible explanation? Does it make the most sense of the facts and the logical analysis that you can find to support your particular explanation? Okay, here's a little activity. A few weeks ago, I don't know if you watched or participated in the last 2 CLCs ago, but we did something where we read a few different sections of writing, and we wanted to figure out whether those paragraphs were explanations or arguments, and then analyze them using Halpern's 6 steps and the explanations criteria. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on the screen. And what I want you to do, Sandra, and I don't know if you can talk or if you need to just rather chat in the box, depending on your situation right now, is I want you to read this paragraph, which has to do with how women and men are drivers and how they drive on the road. And I want you to look back upon your notes on whether that is an explanation or argument that makes sense. Think about whether it has inductive or deductive reasoning. Is it something that you can prove? Absolutely. Deductive. Or is it something that you have induced, and therefore it is a possible explanation but not the likely one? So take a moment, and I want you to read this, and then I want you to kind of comment on how the explanation is, what argument is being argued here, and is it deductive or inductive reasoning. I'll give you a few moments to do that right now. Okay, Sandra, you can either type this in the box if you'd like, or just sort of speak to me directly. But talk me through this argument and whether it's a good one or a bad one, and whether you see inductive or deductive reasoning, and generally just kind of let's work through these sentences for a moment. So feel free to unmute yourself or to start chatting into the group chat, and we will go straight from there. Okay, you're saying that you think all of these statements are examples of inductive reasoning. Tell me, maybe pick 1 or 2 of them and tell me why or how is it inductive reasoning. So just say sentence number 3, and it's inductive reasoning because of, or etc. Just pick 1 example. Okay, again, just for the point of people that are watching later, I'm going to sort of read your comments. So you're saying that all of these statements on the screen are examples of inductive reasoning, and that you chose sentence number 1 to comment upon. The sentence says, women are safer drivers than men. And your comment, Sandra, was that these are assumptions that are being made. So sentence number 1, even though this could be argued to be correct, if there is no evidence of research that was done, then it is not a valid statement. And to that I say, bravo, well done. That's exactly true. All of these sentences that you see on the screen, although they build upon each other and sound like they could be argued to be true, or that there could be some research out there that may support a few of these premises, there is no research, there is no deductive reasoning shown within these 5 sentences. Rather, it is actually, in my opinion, pretty thinly veiled opinion and almost prejudice that has come across here. Although many of us maybe would agree with this, and therefore it is true. It is an example of inductive reasoning, not deductive reasoning. This is probably the case, but we could probably come up with many examples of women that drive quite terribly and men that have never gotten into an accident at all. So this is an example of inductive reasoning. Let's go to a second explanation, or sorry, second example. This is about the band The Beatles. And what I want you to do is the exact same thing. Is this an example of inductive or deductive reasoning? If so, take one of the sentences as an example and just write a little explanation that shows me how that is deductive reasoning. And again, I'll give you a few moments to write that on the screen, or write that in the group chat, excuse me. Sandra, go ahead and type again when you're ready. Tell me whether it's inductive or deductive, and pick a sentence to unpack a little bit. All right, you're saying these are deductive statements, all of them. Again, tell me why you think that is the case. All right, you're saying, again, Sandra's saying that these 5 sentences in regards to an argument about the Beatles being a more popular band than the Rolling Stones She says that all of these sentences build upon each other and basically are deductive statements. And essentially what she's saying is they are based on statistics. For example, sentence number 2, there's evidence of the Beatles having more sales, and sentence number 3, winning more musical awards, as well as selling more albums than the Rolling Stones. Yes, although we don't see the actual statistics, how many have the Beatles sold versus the Rolling Stones, that is something that can be proven, either true or not true, and therefore that is a great example of deductive reasoning. And so again, we just want to say, we want to point you to deductive style writing and deductive style arguments. You are still taking a point of view. I mean, the fact alone that you said that the Beatles are a more popular band than the Rolling Stones, that's a controversial opinion to someone who is a crazy Rolling Stone fan. And even as well as sentence number 5, the opposite way. Despite all of this, the Rolling Stones are often considered to be a technically better band. A person that is a Beatles lover or a rock and roll historian that really sees the Beatles' influence throughout all of rock and much of popular music as a whole might debate that with you. However, you're able to prove most of those sentences, and therefore it is deductive reasoning. Good job. Moving on to kind of our last piece of information for today. I want to briefly touch on the idea of something that we call academic fallacies. And basically, these are statements, and you see 4 examples here, where it sounds like what we're saying is something that is true or something that can be proven or that is deductive in nature. And it might even have some quote-unquote evidence that you could use to support it. But actually, it is a fallacy. It is something that is not entirely true or able to be proven from the Bible. So just, from when you get into it. So you see 4 examples up here. I'm going to look at the third one just because I'm hungry myself, and the idea of thinking about Jungle Oats is cruel, but I'm going to think about it anyways. So third sentence reads this. It says, Jungle Oats is the best breakfast food because it fills up your tummy first thing in the morning. Now, if we were to say inductive or deductive reasoning, probably you would conclude which ones, Sandra. Just quickly type in inductive or deductive. Okay. You're saying it could be either, but that it may be different for some people. To which I would respond to you the following, and I'm sure we could talk about this longer, but I'm just trying to watch the time. To say that Jungle Oats is the best, to say Jungle Oats is the best breakfast food in the manner in which the sentence says it. So the reason behind why it is the best breakfast food is because it fills up your tummy first thing in the morning. In my opinion and mind, that would be more an example of inductive reasoning as opposed to deductive, and therefore would be a fallacy as you write it academically, because you're not actually proving that. You're not talking scientifically that it is the most healthy food for you to have in the morning, or that it somehow coats and lines your stomach in the most full sense, as opposed to anything else that you could eat in the morning that would survive the rest of the day. And so how do we know it's the best breakfast food? You're saying it's the best breakfast food because you think it is. And the reason why you think it is, according to this sentence, is because it fills you up. To which I could reply to you, what if we substituted Jungle Oats for yogurt and muesli? What if we substituted Jungle Oats for cornflakes? What if we substituted Jungle Oats for coffee? Would those become the best breakfast food or drinks? Because they fill you up as well if you drink or eat a lot of it. And so that is an example of what we call an academic fallacy. there is this handout that you're seeing on the screen that you need to go and find on Funda, and it has a bunch of examples of this. Most of them you'll see that Bastian was trying to sort of provoke us to think about how we particularly seem to write and think about this in religious sort of ways. So for example, the third one on this page, the world is in the mess it is because when not everybody accepts Jesus as their Savior, it falls into ruin. That's a sort of sentence that, particularly if you come from a Christian perspective, you would probably, without thinking very deeply about it, go, yes, I agree. And yet, if you were writing academically and you wrote a sentence like that within your essay, which many, many, many of you do, or versions of that, even though I personally agree with you and agree that everyone should accept Jesus as their Savior and Lord, I can't support that as an academic source of writing because you are not deductively reasoning with it. You're basically giving me a veiled version of your opinion. And that is what we call an academic fallacy. So there's a lot more information on that on this particular handout. And again, I'm going to put it on the screen for just a moment so you can make sure you find the right one. Give me a second. So fallacies in academic writing. There's too much to go through right here. I just want to say, please make sure you download and get this, or message Bastian or myself if you are not able to find it on Funda, because there is a lot of good stuff here. And the one that I really want to highlight very briefly, even though I know this is not super big on your screen, is this idea of a fallacy of appealing to a majority. This is something we do within faith-based circumstances or situations all the time. So through appealing to a majority through tradition, a lot of times writers argue that we should do something or believe something in a particular way because that's the way it's always been done. It's the tradition. It's how it is. It's how it's written. So for example, we always celebrate Easter in, well, I would say March or April, even though it's autumn in Cape Town. That's the way my ancestors in the Anglican Church in England celebrated it, and so I am not now going to celebrate Easter in September, which is actually our spring in Cape Town in the Southern Hemisphere, because if you've ever seen adverts for Easter or even sort of writing about Lent or some of the liturgical seasons, you would know that there is so much associated in there with the idea of spring, new life, things getting warm, leaving winter, all that sort of stuff. And you know what? We are entering winter here in Cape Town in the middle of Lent and now sort of into the Easter season. And so this is an appeal to a majority that we are not a part of as people who live in the Southern Hemisphere. And so even though it is tradition that Easter comes in April, i.e. the height of spring, that is not the case here in Cape Town. The other idea is that there is a fallacy of credibility through an appeal to authority. And so we say things like, my pastor says, or this guy says, or I believe this man, or a survey said, and yet we, again, don't cite the source, don't evaluate, or triangulate the source, and so we just sort of say, well, the Bible says. To which I say, I love what the Bible says. I believe deeply in the Bible and in the truth of the Scriptures. I believe they have authority that is absolute and that is powerful. And yet, that is not good academic writing. That's sloppy. It's a fallacy. And for the purpose of evaluating a worldview, it is not helpful. And so I just want to say, please be familiar with this particular piece of critical thinking skill, because it will help you directly get a better grade as you write. Does this make sense, Sandra? Is there anything I need to clarify about fallacies? Or do you feel like you're doing pretty well? Okay, well then that is basically all that we have for today. Is there any other questions that I can answer for you personally? If not, I will say blessings to you as you revise your essay and as you begin to record your presentation, and we look forward to reviewing that in a few weeks. Okay, that is it for today, folks. We really appreciate you being here or watching this broadcast later. Please message us on Funda if you have any questions or comments, and we look forward to seeing you again. Please take care.